Ruto, the president, decided to congratulate Sakaja for apologizing. Congratulations.
For doing the right thing?
Congratulations.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what we've come down to. I cannot believe it.
I think it's very fitting that Midas Touch was playing because everything you touch turns to gold. But it seems with our government, it's the Sadim touch, the exact opposite. Ruin every single thing that they seemingly touch, and we just can't stop talking about one mishap after another. We haven't even delved into the political turmoil, which is known as the diplomatic error that we made. Now we have countries that were seemingly supporting, turning their backs on us. And back at the ranch, meanwhile, back at home, the frustration has really grown. Let me first and foremost welcome John Mutua, who is from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
I know Philaris will delve into this one heavily because she does our financial focus. I hope you've listened to the show. It's every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30, and it's an amazing show alongside Gishinga. Gishinga Ken. They have one heck of a show, and it is tomorrow. It's coming up tomorrow, and they delve into financial matters. Now, listen to this. I'm going to be very blunt and very honest with you, John.
Yeah.
I know we'll be talking about a whole lot of things, Kenya and the debt distress, Treasury with that Sunday Nation story where Treasury, shocker, 1.3 trillion cash drawn in 7 months. There's an article that Philaris also shared with me. Treasury's CBK emergency borrowing hitting 107.5 billion Kenya shillings. There was a tweet on Kenya will be spending 1.6 trillion on debt repayment in 2025, 2026. These things Philaris will delve into heavily. And I, in just a second, taking us up to 56% of the 2.3 trillion revenue, leaving only, get this, 1.23 trillion. That's 44% for salaries, county funds, and government programs. And we haven't even delved into the February inflation, which has risen to 5-month high on food transport costs. Now, here's what I have an issue with. The controller of budget comes out and says this. And then Treasury comes out and rebukes it, so to speak, and says, no. I am very frustrated as a Kenyan. I'll speak for myself. As Lawi, I get really frustrated because I come on here and we're supposed to give information and lead, right? At least give an idea of what path to go from experts like yourself. Yet when Treasury wrote that, I was telling Philaris in the morning, I was left confused. How do I even tackle it? What proof can I get? I have nothing tangible. I'm going by information like the Daily Nation will give that, but they don't have hard facts. It's almost like we're being thrown into a sea of information. Again, I love how Philaris put it. And we have nothing substantial. It is making me crazy because right now I feel like we're going to come here and sensationalize the issue. I have no idea how I can hold them to account. Can I walk up to Treasury? Can I demand it? Is there a route I can use? Do I need to go to the courts? The justice system itself is a toilet. So I don't know what to do. And it's driving me crazy. That's why I told Valaris, Aki handoli. Because I really don't know what power I hold as a citizen of this country. And I have this strong feeling I'm not alone.
That's the sentiment of a lot of Kenyans, myself included, much as, yes, I do get to do the show that we do with Ken Gishinga, and I do put my head into a lot of reading and trying to make sense of all of these headlines and the figures and stuff. But, we are overwhelmed by information. Saturated by too much information. Yet we have more questions than we do have answers. So that's why we have John Mutua here, and I hope you're going to help us make sense of some of these things. Are you as overwhelmed as we are?
Of course, I am. I am as a Kenyan, yes. Yeah.
Overwhelmed as a Kenyan and as an economist, or I think maybe to start off would be, given that the figures are too many. First of all, do you know it's a fact that a lot of Kenyans cannot comprehend just how much a billion is? Leave alone a trillion. Leave alone 1.3 trillion. Yeah? We cannot comprehend those figures. So on matters of public debt, I think that would be a very good place to start from. Yes. Or maybe let me not start from the public debt conversation. What does the Institute of Economic Affairs do, the body that you work for?
Okay. Thanks, Philaris and Chico. And thanks for having me. So the Institute of Economic Affairs is a think tank, or if you like, a research organization. And what we do is promote debate and dialogue on public policy issues. So within the IEA, we have 6 programs. And obviously for this issue that we are discussing this morning, much of that stuff is covered by the program called Public Finance Management. Then we have the other 5 programs that all touch on various important issues within any economy. So what we do is basically try to make sense of some of these things, whether it's issues related to public finance, whether it's issues related to employment, the macroeconomy, inflation, cost of living. So we try to make sense of those issues, and then obviously conduct research or public policy analysis, and use that to engage with policymakers. So government institutions, largely the National Treasury, as well as other line ministries. And we also use the same to engage with the civil society organizations and the media for public education. So on the side of the media and public education, the idea is to present this information to educate them so that they can use it to hold the government to account, as you've mentioned. So trying to break those numbers, just simplifying the information that is packaged. So of course the government produces different documents. So for instance, if you look at the budget cycle, there are various documents that are produced along the cycle, information that informs budget formulation, and all the way to when the budget is tabled at the end of tabled at the National Assembly towards the end of April, and again when from the implementation stage, so from July 1st all the way to June. Mm-hmm. So what the budget that has been passed or approved by the Parliament, that is what informs the release of resources to the different ministries so that they can implement the programs that that were approved. So for instance, if it's the Ministry of Health, they would have said, we want to do ABCD, and so they are supposed to implement or provide those services based on the budget that was approved. And again, during the implementation of the budget, there are various documents that are generated. And so the public can engage with those documents. There are quarterly budget implementation reports that are actually generated by the Office of the Control of Budget, and then you can use that information to check, for instance, whether the ministries are in line in terms of implementing this budget or executing the budget in line with what was approved. So for instance, if there's a program on HIV/AIDS, is the ministry in line? If a certain amount was allocated to that program, are they deviating? Are they off target? And so on. And those reports are actually important because they can give you an idea of whether, if there is any deviation, for instance, it may mean not necessarily that money is lost, but it could be a red flag or an indicator. Yeah, so that's what the Institute of Economic Affairs does.
You know, you speak of red flags, and I can immediately think about 3 things that have been on the headlines.
Yes.
Maybe let me just go as far back as 1 week. Yeah. So we have the current health crisis in this country, where, of course, budget allocations had been made, but we are seeing a situation where there's pending bills when it comes to what was supposed to be allocated under, not allocated, but paid to hospitals under the National Hospital Insurance Scheme. Correct. Then we also have something that's on the Business Daily today, which is pending bills for infrastructure that have amounted to around 665 billion. But they're saying the figures that have been verified is around 200 billion, but they're still verifying these figures. Something that we had from stakeholders in the health ministry as of last week. Yes. Then third, we have situation where, again, still touching on infrastructure, budget allocations have been made, and it's been said government is going to spend X amount on infrastructure. But we are coming back and seeing the relaunch of projects that had been funded by the likes of World Bank, but have been purported to be financed by government. A lot of inaccuracy of figures when it comes to, again, what was allocated vis-a-vis what is being implemented on the ground. And now we find ourselves in a situation where the country has a budget deficit that it's trying to fill in on one hand, And then on this other hand, we have a situation where the same government is borrowing in excess from the central bank, as captured by the Business Daily. I think that was last week on Tuesday. If I could go back to that, Treasury Central Bank emergency borrowing has hit 107 billion shillings. And then I want to revisit this situation of the Treasury shocker, 1.3 trillion cash withdrawn in the last 7 months. So if truth be told, our government was operating along the lines of a report has been made, budget allocations have been made, so we can marry figures. But now we're in a situation where we cannot marry or reconcile figures because either money is lost, unaccounted for, there's no transparency, we cannot track these funds. How did we even get to this place in the... has the situation always been like this as far as managing of our coffers is concerned? Or is this just an experience and something that is very special and peculiar to this administration?
Okay, thanks. The genesis of the fiscal or spending and taxes for Kenya actually can be traced all the way, actually in the last just over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the genesis of the problems that we are experiencing as a country. And why I mention this is that over the last year, actually from Uhuru's regime, what has been happening is that spending in all these years exceeded the revenues that we're able to collect or we generate as a country. And so over these years, what that has meant is that we've had what is called obviously the budget deficits.
Mm-hmm.
As a country, we've not managed to collect enough sufficient revenues to be able to provide the services, construct the roads that we want as a country, provide electricity, ensure that we have teachers in school, the recruitment of teachers that we want, ensure that we have recruitment of medical personnel that we require as a country. Now, but most of these resources have actually gone towards infrastructure development.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that has meant is obviously the fact that we've been running our then obviously the government has had to borrow. Borrow from two sources, either domestically from the financial institutions that we have, commercial banks and pension funds and the like, and as well as externally from multilateral lenders or from countries, whether it's your China, Japan, and so on. And so this challenge that we have, because what has happened is, if I give you the figures for 2023, 2024,
mm-hmm.
The term, there is this item called the Consolidated Fund Services,
mm-hmm.
or debt servicing.
Mm-hmm.
So we've accumulated huge debts
mm-hmm.
over these years because of these budgetary pressures and the different promises that the government have made.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that has made, what that means is that because money that has been borrowed has to be paid,
mm-hmm.
and it's a similar analogy to any household. So if you borrow money, obviously, at the end of every month, the first thing that you have to do, or if you have a loan, SACCO
mm-hmm.
loan or a loan from the bank, you have to set aside those. So if you're supposed to be paying 20,000 per month, mm-hmm. then before you do anything, you have to set aside those resources. So the same analogy applies to government. So by 2023, 2024, that's end of June, our consolidated fund, which is what is called mandatory spending, was 1.76 trillion. So it means for every 100 shillings that we collect, about 61 shillings goes to payment of debt. So out of the 100 shillings, only about 49 shillings is left for the government to pay wages to the civil servants, for provision of services, whether it's health, education, etc., and infrastructure development.
I like that you say to pay debt. Which
Yes.
debt is prioritized? Because I have an interesting clip here for you.
Yes.
It is one I saw on X, and I just want to play it very quickly before we delve into sports and come back and have your reaction to it. But it is from one Don Victor Simon, who broke down what the national government and county government are doing to business people.
Kama wewe ni MP, kama wewe ni MCA, kama wewe ni senator, ninaomba kwa heshima, kwa taathima, usikize hii video. Pending bill ni deni. Whichever you look at it, pending bill ni deni ambayo inafaa in this budget 2025-2026 should be factored in. Actually, it should be among the first things that should be paid both by national and county governments. We are joking. Counties supply us 200 plus billions. National government, we are talking about 700 plus billions. This figure, it's not being factored in as a debt, is one, from an accounting perspective, totally wrong. From a legal perspective, totally wrong. From an economic perspective, extremely wrong. And even from a political perspective, how do you grow a country where all suppliers are struggling to get their payments done? Someone, somewhere, must do the right thing. We will keep pushing. Suppliers are to just we will keep pushing. Supplying the government should not be a crime. It should be a means of livelihood. Just like the way supplying every other sector should be. Na hii tunasema tu kwa heshima. Pending bills be factored in this year's budget. 2025-2026 as a right to get paid.
It's very sad that there are people who are owed life-changing amounts, who've taken loans in order to do this business, and then ultimately not being paid. Yet John has said, how much was set aside for paying 1 trillion?
So in total, the debt service by end of 2023-2024, debt service and pension obligation is amounts to about 1.76, and about 95% of that, so give and take maybe 1.7 trillion is going towards debt servicing, payment of our debt. So you can already see the pressure that the government is facing. So what happens is, because we have a huge portion of the resources that is collected by, of course, the KRA and other agencies, so a huge proportion of that amount, about 61%, goes towards payment of debt. So it means there are delays in sending funds, particularly to county governments and even government and even the national government. And obviously county governments suffer disproportionately. So what that means is that when they contract or engage suppliers, they are not able to pay them on time. So the year comes to an end, and so what happens is they have debts to meet. And this is what comprises the pending bills. And obviously pending bills has been a major issue or challenge in the country. Actually, the correct, in terms of our liabilities, it is correct actually to say that you need to, in order to understand the actual state of the liability for the country, you need to add the total debt, and the total debt is now, by as at end of December, was about 10.9 trillion. So if you add pending bills to that, you can already see that will come almost to 11 trillion. Yet our GDP is about 18 trillion.
We'll be right back with John Mutua, who's from the Institute of Economic Affairs, so that we can try and see if we can balance this ledger book, aka government debt, income, recurring expenses, etc.
In Capital Newsbeat this hour. Capital Sports Update, where sports is taken seriously.
All right, so some good news. If you are a rugby fan, heck, if you're a Kenyan, you need some good news. Well, I have some. National Women's Rugby Sevens team beat Argentina 17-12 winning the first leg of the World Challenger Series in Cape Town last night. Grace Adhiambo scored the opening try while Judith Oma added a brace as the Lionesses cruised to their first ever Challenger Series trophy in the history of the competition. Kenya will now turn their focus to the second leg of the series, which is set to be held this weekend, also in Cape Town. Elsewhere, national women's football team coach Beldin Odemba says they will be preparing pretty well ahead of the final round of the Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers. That game will be against Gambia in October this year. Odemba says she has received assurances, much needed assurances, from Football Kenya Federation President Hussein Mohamed of extensive support in their preparations.
I am assured by the President today that we are going to get adequate time and everything that we need for preparation towards that match. We have 2 FIFA calendars before the match, one in April and another one in June, and we are reassured that we are going to get good friendlies then for preparation.
Well, Harambee Starlets qualified for the final round courtesy of that 1-0 win over Tunisia on Wednesday last week. Bernd Leno was the hero for Fulham, who bundled FA Cup holders Manchester United out of the competition on post-match penalties at Old Trafford last night. The German saved Victor Lindelof and Joshua Zirkzee's spot kicks as the Cottagers converted all their penalties to seal their ticket in the quarterfinals. United their only hope of silverware now is the Europa Cup, where they meet Spanish side Real Sociedad in the knockout stages this week. Meanwhile, when it comes to the NBA, Philaris, Clippers and Lakers, it was an LA affair.
Oh, yeah. And Luka Doncic in the win had 29 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, and 5 3-points. The man was shining and glowing. They won 108-102. How do you feel about that?
Capital Sports Update. Up to the minute sports, where sports is taken seriously.
The best mix of music. 98.4 Capital FM.
Credit MasterCard is exactly what you need to be walking to any I&M branch across the country, getting yourself one, because really you should not be postponing enjoyment and everyday life because of money hiccups. But if it's a new car that you want to buy, if it's taking that trip because Easter is coming up, oh yes, and it's going to be one long weekend, or you just want to move houses because you want to be in a comfy apartment, you're tired of your current furniture, I&M have a solution for you. And here's the thing, or the best part, this card actually comes with the best loyalty program in town. You get a point for every shilling that you spend on it, and get this, with 100% payout, something that no other bank in Kenya is promising you. And yeah, that's for every shilling you spend, you get a point. Every shilling you spend, you get a point. And these points can be redeemed when you're booking hotels, when you're booking flights, when you are, I don't know, shopping. Yeah, cashback. 100%. It's the best deal out there. So I want you to walk into any I&M branch and ask them about the World Credit MasterCard today. Because, yeah, Felaris told you and Chico told you, and we're here to just make your life a lot easier. And I want you to stick around because there's something else that you could get from this card, which is something they call the Milele Rewards Point. I'll be letting you know more about that. Not now, just a bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts for our descent into
Dubai International Airport.
No. Kigali, I want to see the gorillas.
Aye? Are we pretend traveling?
Nope. We are picking our next holiday destination. I can now earn up to 2% on my everyday spend on my I&M Bank World Credit MasterCard. And I can redeem my points for flights on I&M Bank's new Milele Rewards program.
Oh yes, I just redeemed mine for shopping today.
Don't just dream. Apply for the I&M Bank World Credit MasterCard on the I&M Bank On The Go app. Every 20th customer to get the card gets 50,000 Milele points worth 50,000 shillings. I&M Bank, on your side. Terms and conditions apply.
Capital Traffic and Travel.
Roads are looking horrific. I just seen a message from Brian via 0701984984. Eastern Bypass complete with a picture. Taj Mahal at a standstill. It's a back to school madness, and you'll be dealing with that one. So the Eastern Bypass is requiring you to have a whole lot of patience.
It's a no-go zone. Delays 40 minutes. Maze Pole Sana Brian. If you're on Landis Road, there's traffic also on that, and it's building up, and delays of 15 minutes is what you can expect. Meanwhile, if you're on James Gishuru, traffic sporty along most of the road, especially from Social House kwenda juu mpaka Wayaki Way. If you spot any incidents on the road, 0701984984 is exactly how you let us know, or at 984 in the morning using the hashtag drive-in over at X.
Capital Traffic and Travel.
I know Falaris said sorry, Brian, but Pole Guadini, if you needed to be at work, you probably should have left a bit earlier. Good morning. We're back to Capital in the Morning, and our discussion is all about money. Falaris pointed at the paper and became absolutely agitated.
I'm livid because, we left that conversation with John having told us something of concern. And I think our economy and our country is in the HDU. Is there a level in hospital that is higher than the high dependency unit?
ICU.
ICU and HDU. Sisi tuko huko, critical condition. Because let me just go back to the figures that John shared here. We are a bit 11. We are 11 trillion in debt. That's domestic public debt, and our GDP is currently at 18 trillion. Now, this, in simpler terms, to you, our listener, is exactly like this: you earn 100,000, na unaishi kwa nyumba ya 70,000, and you're left with 30,000 for your expenses. Internet, transport, kulipa mfanyikazi, stipend for your wife, school fees, all of that. That's the situation Kenya is in right now. And we clearly do not have a formula. From where I sit and having listened to Mbadi, who's the Treasury CS, there's no formula to how we go about settling this debt. And actually the formula government has adopted at this point is expanding. The words that the taxman has been using is expanding its tax base. And what's happened? We are living in a situation where companies are shutting down because the tax regime doesn't make sense. Kenyans, our pay slip is a bit too, they're taking up and taking a lot. And on top of that, the reliance on private sector, because when you speak to economists and people in the space keep saying that our saving grace is the private sector. Yet the private sector is still crying out and saying, no, We are suffering under this tax regime now. John, me, from where I'm sitting, I'm feeling a bit hopeless, yeah? Chico, I don't know if you're feeling the same. You look it.
It drives me even more frustrated, John, because most of the borrowing we do is going into recurring expenses instead of developmental agendas.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Sorry, just to come back again, given the level of debt, which is about 61% of GDP, so if you divide 11 trillion over 18 trillion, which is the size of the economy, you get about 61%. Now, to show you the amount, the extent to which, as a country, we are in terms of fiscal challenge, is that our debt service as a percentage of ordinary revenue, which is basically our tax revenue, rose from about 41% in 2019-2020 to 68%. So a point of correction, it's not even 61 shillings. So for every 100 shillings that we collect, actually 68 shilling is going towards debt. Now, the challenge we are having is that revenue collection is not responding to the growth in economy. So, whereas, yes, the economy has been growing, and of course, we are having even a challenge in 2024, or if I start from 2022, the economic growth was about 4.9%. So there was an improvement in 2023 to 5.6%. But in 2024, there's a slowdown in economic activity, because if you look at the 3 quarters, so we already have information from the National Bureau of Statistics for the first 3 quarters. So it's likely that projections show that the growth rate for 2024 will be below 5%. So there are projections of 4.7, 4.8, but basically below 5%. And we are not collecting enough. So if you look at, again, the last, since 2018 actually, revenue has underperformed. So that puts a lot of pressure on government. So it means the government is struggling in terms of liquidity to pay for services, to send money to the county governments. And that's why when county governments engage contractors, suppliers, they are unable to pay them on time. So, of course, there are certain things that the government has done. For instance, even in terms of increasing revenue collection, there are ongoing tax policy, tax administration reforms. So, obviously, increase of taxes, tax rates and the like is a no-go zone. So, the best that the government can do in terms of tax administration is to enhance efficiency in collection. Of course, using technology and the like. Of course, increase the tax base. That has been a major challenge, because the major burden in tax, in terms of, for instance, revenue collection or contribution to revenue, is the people in the formal sector. There are only about 3.5 to 3.6 million Kenyans who are salaried.
Yeah.
So collection of taxes from salaried Kenyans is easy, of course, through their pay slips and the like. But we have about 80% of the economy which is in the informal sector. So collecting from this sector has been the major challenge. Of course, with the reforms, compliance is still low and the like. I think if government continues to put in more in terms of just administration, tax education, etc., they can improve. But it seems, because of the structure of the economy, that response, even with the growth of the economy, there's still a challenge, because revenues are not growing in tandem. So it means there's much more that needs to be done in terms of cracking that challenge of ensuring that, for instance, we identify the number of businesses in the informal sector, have them registered, and so on. Of course, government is going into areas like rental income and the like, but there are challenges there. There are also questions of political economy, like when it comes to just collecting money from property tax from properties.
Mm.
There is obviously subtle or latent pushback. I mean, because obviously we know that the people who own property are the political class.
Yeah.
So whereas at the county level, counties, especially the urban base, can collect a bit more in property taxes. There's a lot of potential in there around that, but we are not collecting much. Because, for instance, in Nairobi, what informs property or land rates is based on values that were done in the early 1980s. Whereas a property now, like where this office is, the value of this property, if it was based on this year, it's quite substantial compared to the value in the 80s, which is what is informing what the county of Nairobi collects. So when you look at all these things, what this means is that the government, and yes, it's trying to do that, has to do much more in terms of rationalization of its expenditure and prioritization, reprioritizing expenditure. So we are seeing a bit of movement in terms of restructuring of parastatus, because there's a lot of money that goes towards transfers, money that is sent to parastatus. But if you look at the different parastatus that we have, for instance, Kenya Power, Kenya Pipeline, those are commercially viable parastatus, which can stand on their own feet. So they should not be receiving any support. And then we need to reduce the number of parastatus. Obviously, that will have effects in terms of lost jobs and the like. But that's the only way that the government can reduce the deficit that we have. Wastages is the other area, fraud and wastages. There's been some movement in those areas, but it is not enough. It's not significant. But that's where the focus should be. So when you combine expenditure rationalization, reduction of waste, rationalization of expenditure, prioritizing expenditure to the things that we need, and then obviously in terms of taxes, just enhancing administration and compliance, etc., then that is what will move the country to the direction that we desire to see as a people. Yeah.
You know, for me, my concern is this, yeah? You give very good recommendations, and I understand that's the role that the Institute of Economic Affairs plays. But when you see things like, and let me just go back to you saying that 80% of Kenyans are in the informal sector, correct?
Yeah.
And that's where government is struggling to do collections. But here's the thing. I think anyone would be more than happy to make their contribution to their country if they can see their money being put to good use.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So you'd even have a situation where Kenyans would not be complaining as much if the deductions that are being made on the payslip, and that's on the 3.5 to 3.6% of Kenyans who are in the formal sector, they would not be complaining if they can see their money being put to good use.
Yes.
I go back to your point on inefficiencies and mismanagement of money. When we think about the context of the headline that we saw yesterday, 1.3 trillion having been withdrawn in the last 7 months, and the statement that came from the National Treasury and Economic Planning body that said that they've been implementing an automated system, but for now they've been managing aspects of domestic debt manually. For me, that was screaming red and had me very, very worried. Because I would not fault a kiosk that uses manual receipts to sell milk and bread. And this is in no way, of course, undermining the kind of business that is. But I would say that business is being run a lot better compared to a country that is handling these kinds of money. I don't even think our treasury should be proud with that statement that they chucked yesterday saying that the systems are not automated. Isn't that supposed to be something of key priority if you're looking to manage debt and manage those volumes of money, yet you're saying we are using a manual system? And this, I'm so confused, John. Very, very confused that someone will be seated someone and okaying manual transactions of these kind of volumes, and then goes on to reassure us as Kenyans that we are compliant to certain legal frameworks that dictate how we go about these systems. Are bodies like yours there to offer advice to, why are we operating like a kiosk?
Okay. Yeah, I'm equally surprised. Of course, for government transaction, financial transactions, whether it's borrowing, collection of revenue, and spending that, all that is supposed, we should be able to trace that. And there's a system called Integrated Financial Management Information System, IFMIS,
yeah.
that governs all the financial transactions and helps with the reporting. And that's actually, there are reports. The reports that we see generated are actually based on what that system, what goes through, or what is captured in the system.
Do you think that system can be interfered with? Because we've seen a few times on the headlines where IFMIS has come under scrutiny.
I mean, we've had some challenges with IFMIS, particularly at the county government level. That's where we see a bit of a mix between manual and
automated
systems. At the national level, it's not a challenge.
It's not a challenge.
Now, of course, the system has different modules, and I think the one that was recently integrated is what is called the e-procurement. So, procurement processes were partially, largely automated, but there was a bit of manual. So, this system is supposed to be integrated with other systems, like, for instance, the payroll system. So government has what is called public payroll database. So all these are supposed to be integrated. Again, at the national level, it's not a big challenge, but
County
it is
level.
at the county. Because currently at the county, we still have some county governments that are collecting resources through automated systems, but with a mix of manual. When you have such a when a mix of or a breed of that, obviously there are challenges in terms of leakages, reporting, and so on. And that's where sometimes you have money being getting lost. And obviously even reporting becomes a challenge. So I'm surprised, unless maybe they're talking about the system at the national level having temporarily been on a downtime. There's they call it a downtime, and it could be related to other technical hardware issues. But to a large extent at the national level, that is not a challenge. But I wanted to chime in also on the issue of that borrowing. So what happens, obviously, given the challenges with the liquidity, government is forced to borrow from the central bank, the overdraft facilities, in order to ensure that government operations do not come to a halt. There's payment of salaries, provision of services, and most of this money is actually go towards recurrent expenditure. So that's why you can see government borrowing quite heavily from the central bank.
Chico, I don't know what your final input on this would be, but for me, it's a question of: do we see ourselves getting out of this kind of situation anytime soon? Because from where we see it, it's like you said, it goes as far back as a decade. And now we're in this place where it's almost like we're between a rock and a hard place. Because damned if you do, damned if you don't. Damned if you borrow, damned if you don't. Because we still need to make sure that the government has enough money to finance projects, to pay salaries, and to just keep things moving. Do we see ourselves getting out of this situation, and how fast can it recover from this? And this is assuming that we fix the bits where we are hemorrhaging funds.
I mean, it's going to take a bit of time, and I mean that's why I'm calling upon Kenyans to ensure that they interact in terms of giving their views. towards formulation of the budget. We have the budget policy statement that provides a sneak peek of what will be contained in the budget. So by engaging and participating, we should be able to put a lot of pressure on government. So if you look at what was contained in the BPS, the statements, it seems there seems to be a plan, but following through that plan is often what is the challenge. And this issue will actually take a bit of time because, as I mentioned, revenue is not performing or responding to economic growth. And so the main focus should be on the expenditure side of things. I'm trying to look at the figures for expenditure. I think the total overlay was about 4.1 trillion, and the targeted expenditure is just under 3 trillion. So you can see, of course, there's a 1 billion deficit. So we need to see a proper plan from the government, with a lot of pressure from the Assembly, the National Assembly, in terms of rationalizing expenditure, trying to live as much as possible within our means. I want to laugh at that. As a country, the ambition of infrastructure development, some of those things should be put on hold. There are certain things like trainings, purchase of things like computers, furniture, those things. The government needs to freeze those things. It's what is called the austerity measures. Engage in those austerity measures. Even the training of civil servants and the like, that has to be put on hold for the economy to first grow, so that through the growth of the economy, it should be able to provide these things as we go along. So that needs to be put on hold. And then we need to also only focus on ongoing projects that have been properly appraised. And then reduce, because one of the challenges that we have actually is in allowances. Allowances has been a major challenge across national government, county government, National Assembly. I know the salaries and revenue, salaries and
Remuneration
Commission has tried as much as possible to temper that, of course, with a lot of resistance from parliamentarians. But addressing the whole aspect of allowances is key to reducing recurrent expenditure.
And because, unlike the government that needs to watch its spending, we do not want you to suffer. And I&M are here to make sure that you do not have to hold back on those plans, courtesy of the I&M World Credit MasterCard, which, by the way, you can access by visiting any I&M branch or going on their app and really registering for that. And listen, for every 20th customer, if you accumulate 50,000 points, which equals 50,000 milele points, you get 50,000 Kenya shillings in equal cash for you to spend. I mean, what's the incentive there? The government, we're saying stop spending, but I&M are saying, come, we'll give you something for you to spend. Book that holiday, pay school fees, buy that car, move apartments, buy furniture, whatever it is, I&M is here for you. And yeah, once you go there, just say Chico and Felari sent you there, okay? Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you very much to our guest, John Mutua from the Institute of Economic Affairs, painting rather grim but vitally important picture for us to see so we can understand the situation this country is in, and also giving ideas on how to curb that spending and try and bring us back to life.